Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to Make Critical Conversations Count. My name is Cami Twiggs Taylor, and I am the Director of U.S. Small and Medium Businesses and Volunteerism at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. For those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit improving access and knowledge in entrepreneurship to advance economic progress for all. As you'll see in the chat in just a moment, the Nasdaq Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to help entrepreneurs fuel prosperity, no matter where their journey begins. Be sure to check out the links and resources shared in the chat. I'm going to launch a few polls at this time to step back and take a temperature gauge on how all of you are doing today. We use this information to guide the programs we provide for this global community of entrepreneurs. If there are specific topics or challenges you'd like us to create resources for, feel free to share them in the chat. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we get started. First, let us know where you're dialing in from by dropping it in the chat. We'd love to see where everyone's joining us from during our time together. Second, we'll have a live Q&A at the end of the event, so feel free to submit your questions at any time using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to get to as many as we can. While you're answering, I'd also like to take a moment to recognize the incredible support of our corporate partners. The work we do at the center wouldn't be possible without the generosity and belief of our partners and funders, including Nasdaq, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, KPMG, Walmart, the Asia Innovation Hub, Wilson Sonsini, the Narit Foundation, and BPM. We are deeply grateful for their partnership, and we hope that you'll join us in sharing that appreciation. All right, let's take a look at these polls. What is keeping you up at night? Finance, sales, marketing, scale, pivot, team, or surviving? Let's see. All right, so it looks like finance and sales are tied. So many of us are feeling that. And a few of us are also sharing marketing, surviving, scale, and then pivot. All right. Well, without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our special guest, Beth Granger. She is a trainer, consultant, speaker, and also a Milestone Circles graduate. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you. Great to be here. I'm enjoying seeing where everybody's coming from. I'm here in snowy Long Island. On snowy Long Island, there's a whole thing about on or in. And I'll bet you're a bit like me. And you've left a conversation, a sales conversation, a networking conversation, even a personal conversation, thinking, oh, I should have said that differently, or I could have said that a different way. Maybe even waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, replaying the conversation over and over in your head. I'm just going to share some slides. And then I have to move things around. You may know that when you do Zoom, you have to get back the chat. So there we go. All right, I'm back. So these conversations that we have that are really important, sometimes they don't go the way we hope. And there are some techniques and some phrases to use to make them go better. In addition, most people start a business because they have a skill, a passion, an expertise, not because they naturally know how to network or they naturally know how to sell. Case in point, I started my business 15 years ago. I originally thought I was looking for a new job and was invited to a networking group, and they actually knew I was starting my business before I did. So, but yet, right, I didn't know what networking was. I didn't know how to introduce myself. I didn't know how to have a sales conversation, and especially the budget and money conversation with a prospect. That was not something I was comfortable with back then. You may be wondering a little bit about who I am. So I'm a trainer, consultant, and speaker, mostly speaking about using LinkedIn as a networking and marketing tool, but also to help people grow their business, their brand, their visibility, both in person and online. I'm also an Exactly What to Say certified guide, and that is all about having better critical conversations. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm curious, I've seen where you're from in the chat, but I'd love to know where you are in your business. Did you just start? Are you thinking of starting? Are you 15 years in like I am? Where are you in your business? 1 year in, congratulations. 6 years, 14. Excellent. Lisa, hello. I see some familiar names. This is fabulous. And people I'm just meeting. 3 years, 7, launching next month. Excellent. Fabulous. So it's the communities that we build of people having their own business and starting businesses that can help us through all the ups and downs. I like to describe it as the best roller coaster ride I've ever been on because there are ups and downs sometimes within the same day. There are curves that you can't see coming, but yet it's exciting and scary. So, oh, second round at 2 years. Excellent. This is great. So all different places. Everybody's in their own spot in their business. As I go through some slides, you will notice some interesting stats come up. So on this one, it's from a study that the Exactly What to Say group did with the Center of Generational Kinetics about how better communication will drive performance and retention and results at work. And that doesn't just mean companies, it can mean small businesses, all different types of companies. And I found it pretty interesting, so I'm sharing some of those on the slides as well. So before we can think about having better critical conversations, we need to think about what are they? What are those conversations, those moments that matter? And it really depends on a conversation where you have a really vested interest in the outcome. So for me, that might be a networking conversation. That might be a sales conversation. That might be a conversation with a client or a collaboration partner or referral partner. If you have a team, obviously conversations with your team can be really important as well. Even, if you're looking for funding, so conversation with potential investors, advisors, all different people in your world. Speaking of networking, if you'd like to, you can do me a favor or do yourself a favor. We can connect. You can actually follow me on LinkedIn. I'm going to put the link in the chat. And I should just copy it rather than typing it because, that makes sense. So we can have conversations in the future. For you, in the chat, what conversations do you have coming up? What moments that matter? Do you have a conversation with a prospect, with a team member, with a potential investor? What conversations do you have coming up, say in the new year? I don't know what's happening in the next 2 weeks. So let's say in the new year that you already know about, that you really care about the result. A conversation with a previous partner. Yeah, that can be definitely important. And these same ideas that we're going to talk about also work in person. They anything where you care about the outcome. So partnership, sponsorship opportunity with investors. Yeah. Networking groups, people who can connect you to people that you want to get in front of. Love it. With a mentor. Collaboration opportunity. That's a good one. So all of these conversations, it's really good to think about what those conversations are because conversation in passing, like what time is it? You want the answer, but it's not really important to you and your business. So understanding the moments that really matter to you in your business and life are important. Now, years ago, before I started my business, I worked in corporate, and I had to pitch to the CFO to get new computers for the department, because we were about 10 people with Macintosh computers and the whole rest of the company was on PCs. So I planned ahead. I thought about all the things that the CFO might ask me, and had to go in with that in mind. And he asked me a question that I could not have anticipated. He asked me, can you have the CD? This was long enough ago that there were CD drives in the computer. And he asked me, can you have the CD drives taken out? So I'll come back to that in the future, but that was a conversation that mattered, right? I had a vested interest. Our computers were really old. It was taking a long time to get things done. So let's talk about, before we get into some phrases and the foundational work, let's talk about something that in the Exactly What to Say world we call the trust triangle. It's 3 ingredients to make up a really good conversation. So the first part is curiosity. So when you go into a conversation with curiosity, you're going to learn things. What's going to happen as a result of that is that there will become certainty. If you go into a conversation, or reverse it, have you ever had a conversation with somebody, perhaps they were trying to sell you something, and if they were too certain right away, if they didn't ask you any questions and they said something like, you should buy this car, or you should sell your house, or whatever it might be, if they were too certain in the beginning, you would automatically put up a wall. You wouldn't be comfortable with that conversation because they were they didn't know anything about you yet. So by using your curiosity, you can uncover things and develop certainty together with another person. And by being curious enough for long enough, that leads to empathy. And there's someone named John Acuff who had a great definition for empathy. And he said, empathy is caring about what the people you care about care about. And I love that definition. I couldn't come up with a better one. So the idea is, by being truly curious, and you can't just make it up. It can't be reading from a script of questions because you need to know things. When you show that you're empathetic and you show that you really want to understand another person's situation, that leads to being relatable. And these 2 things together become trust. Because if you don't have trust, nobody's going to want to work with you. Maybe people say they think they buy logically, but they buy emotionally. They buy, or they engage with you for different things because they trust you. And example being in networking, I don't know how many of you do a lot of networking, but some of you mentioned networking earlier in the chat. So when you network, think about when you're in a room with people that you may or may not know, and you're hoping to meet people that can help you with your business. Think about the questions that you ask. So those questions lead to conversations, right? If you're in a networking and somebody's just talking all about themselves and they're not asking you anything about yourself, what are you going to do? You're going to go get coffee. So those questions lead to the conversations that lead to the relationships, and those relationships are what lead to the opportunities and the actions that you're looking for in whatever result it might be. So let's think about for yourself, and you might want to, some people like to have a document up or have an actual piece of paper to take some notes for themselves. If that's you, go for it. Think about what questions for this conversation that you've put in the chat, or that you've just thought about yourself, that you have coming up. What questions could you be asking to get information to understand if this situation makes sense? If you should collaborate with somebody, if this partnership should go forward. So think about some questions that you can ask to get clarity on the other person's situation and their need or lack of need of working with you in whatever way. When you've asked enough questions and you've built enough trust, it will seem natural to have just a little bit of courage to make that ask or take that action or hope for that action that's going to come next. Think about, right, when somebody tries to sell you something and they don't even know you, no, thank you. But at some point in a conversation with somebody, it becomes natural. In fact, you as someone trying to sell an idea or a product or a service, they might even say to you, if you've built up enough trust with them, you don't have to say, hey, do you want to buy? They'll say, how much does it cost? How do we begin? Right? They'll start asking you the question. So the next thing I want to share is the 4 cornerstones of conversational excellence. And I'm going to go into each one of these. And they seem pretty simple, but when we dig deeper into them, they have a huge impact. And the first one, I always think about this one in relation to, has anybody here ever run a marathon? I have not. I'm better to stand on the sidelines and cheer people in, but yes, okay. So some people have. You didn't wake up one morning and just go run a marathon. You planned ahead. You did some shorter runs. Maybe you worked with a coach. Maybe you changed your sneakers or running shoes, depending where you're from. Right? So it's this same idea applies to conversations. If you don't plan ahead, you might say something just because it comes to your mind, but planning ahead will make it a much more powerful conversation and less likely to have people put their walls up or objections or whatever, make it adversarial. So the importance of planning ahead starts with, and we call this doing the work before the work, starts with what we already discussed in the chat. So what conversations do you have coming up? Literally, looking at your calendar, Tuesday at 2, I'm speaking with, I'm looking for an example. I'm going to be having a meeting with a potential collaboration partner. So understanding the actual conversations. The next thing, what objections might you hear? And the objections you can learn from previous conversations. So in the past, in a similar situation, what objections have come up? The idea of thinking about these objections first is because then you can do 2 things. You can ask a question that shows you understand them. That's that whole empathy piece combined with the questions. You can bring it up ahead of time. So then it's not an objection. It's just part of the conversation. So tell me in the chat, in previous conversations like the one that you have coming up, what objections have you heard or roadblocks have you faced? Think about an objection. I'll start you off with, it's too expensive, right? So that's an objection somebody might have. I can't afford it. What other objections have you heard in previous conversations that you don't want to hear or you don't want to stop the conversation? They need to get paid. Yep. How can I trust you? That's a good one. Yeah. I don't have time. The time isn't right. Don't know anyone who needs that. Why should I do business with you? Yeah, these are good. Too pricey. I have to confer with someone else. We don't have the right team members. These are great. Money. Yep. Too early or too novel. Oh, that's a good one. Don't have the time right now. Yes. So I'm going to share with you the common objections are on the left side of this slide, and then some roadblocks that might happen are on the right side. And all the objections tend to fall into these categories, right? Time, finances, they're considering other options, they're not the right person, right? Or they don't have the budget right now. The one that I find really interesting actually is don't believe you. So when I've given this presentation or a version of this presentation, that's the one that people either haven't thought of or really strikes them as important. So if you've built up that trust from the trust triangle, they are more likely to believe you. Or if you have examples of having done that same thing before, um, that's why they might believe you or might not believe you. So let's see if other people put in. Yeah. And someone said, have you ever heard of the long no? It's where prospects continue to engage, always asking for more, but never buying. Yes. Yeah. So for me, when it comes to sales, I want one of three things. I want a yes, a no, or a let's have a conversation in the future, and specifically when that's going to be. I have had that same situation. I'm sure we all have, where someone will call me every couple of months with a question, and they're just not ready to take that step. So they're not the right customer for me, and that's fine. Not everybody is going to be the right customer. That those questions that you ask will help determine that together. It's really not. There are times where I've said, no, you're not the right person. I'm not the right person for this. Let me introduce you to somebody who is. So thinking about these common objections can help you ahead of time because you can bring them up. So for instance, when you're in a sales conversation, you can say, so what is your decision-making process in your organization? Are there other people who have to be part of this decision? Or giving somebody permission to say no too. It sounds like it's interesting to you, but that you might want to say no. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable saying that. If it's not right for you, I want to hear that. The next one is curiosity is the fuel for great conversation. So I already brought this up with the trust triangle. Curiosity is where you get the evidence, the information to determine together whether this conversation should progress or that some action should be taken. And in a networking perspective, I always think about this. I don't know who said it, but someone said it's better to be interested than interesting. So if you're shy, you may not think I'm shy, but when I go into situations, I feel like I'm shy sometimes. So by asking questions, that gets a conversation started. If I'm truly curious about another person, people love to talk about themselves, right? I'm gonna learn about them. I'm gonna learn, can we become partners? Is there someone I can introduce to them? Can they help me? So by being curious, it keeps the conversation going. And like I mentioned before, we've all been to an event where somebody just talks about themselves and doesn't show any interest in you, and we walk away, right? Virtually or physically. Thinking about the questions ahead of time goes back to that doing the work before the work. So thinking about questions you can ask to uncover what you need to know to determine if you should move forward with somebody. The next one, people do things for their own reasons and not yours. I know that sounds, yeah, but of course. But there are times when, for instance, somebody didn't call you back, or, right, like we make things up in our head about why that's happening. Oh, they don't want to work with us. Well, maybe they had something in their life. Maybe you're part of what they're doing, but right now they, have to go get their tire changed. You don't know. People do things because it's important to them. And you can't change someone's mind. What you can do is help them see a different perspective. So if somebody is, for instance, thinking they don't need your product or service or don't want to collaborate with you or whatever it is, you can't make them change their mind, but sometimes you can help them see things a different way and discover for themselves that maybe they have an interest or want to speak further. In fact, I like to say, do not make a recommendation about working together, about whatever it might be, until you can say, because you said X, Y, and Z, I recommend. And how do you get that evidence? I hinted at it multiple times before. It's by asking those questions. In a few minutes, I'm going to be sharing some actual phrases that you can use. And the phrases are in different categories. So we have some rejection-free opening, a way to start a conversation. And then the ones that connect to this are what I call perspective changers. And perspective changers are ways to get people to see things potentially differently. Kamala needs that on a t-shirt. Okay. I don't know which thing I said that you need on a t-shirt, but maybe I'll make one. What a great idea. So having that, being able to say that because you said, the more questions you ask, and not peppering them, right? It's a conversation. You're going to ask a question. Maybe they'll ask you a question. It's not literally running down a script. So that, again, people do things for their own reasons, and you can uncover their reasons. You can uncover what's important to them. If I had had a conversation with that CFO ahead of time, I might have learned that he was concerned about people having CD drives in the computer because he thought they were going to play games during the day. And the fourth one, the person asking the questions controls the conversation. How many of you, if I could see you, all of you, you'd be raising your hand right now. How many of you have been on an interview? Yes. How many of you have interviewed others? Many of you probably have. So you noticed that the person asking you the questions, they were controlling that conversation. So by asking questions, you can both lead the dance, as it were, lead the conversation, or get control of the conversation again by asking a question. And also remember that you don't always have to answer every question that you get. You can respond to a question with a question. So sometimes they're asking you something, and it's much better to turn that around and ask a clarifying question or a question that brings the conversation back to where you want it to be. So I'm going to share some of the phrases. This Exactly What to Say work is from a book. In the book, there are 23 phrases, and then we don't have time to go over all of them. And then in the larger body of work and things that I do, there are actually 32 phrases. So I've picked some of the ones that I think will be most helpful for you. And they're either phrases or frameworks for the way to say something. And the first one is not a phrase, it's a framework, part of the rejection-free opening category. And I think about this one as a great way to get people comfortable. They're not going to feel like you're selling them, and you can't be selling them, right? So you have to go into this with honesty and integrity and all of that. And so what it is, for example, somebody fills out a form on your site, your website, and you reach out to them in some way, maybe on the phone. Do people answer the phone anymore? I don't know. But so it's a polite opening, a mutually agreeable fact, and an easy to answer question. Example might be somebody fills out a form on my site. They give me their phone number. I call them up. I say, "Hi, it's Beth calling from Beth Granger Consulting. You recently filled out a form on our website. What questions can I help you with?" So they can't argue with the fact, right? It's just a fact. And when I've done longer sessions on this topic, I actually had people use this, come up with an opening fact question conversation, and they texted it to somebody and got an answer within the time of the session. So if there's somebody that you would like an answer to an easy question or to reconnect, feel free to right now come up with an opening fact question, hi, whoever, a fact that they can agree with, and a easy to answer question. So you're not going to jump to like, would you like to buy my product or services, but an easy to answer question. For instance, I have a webinar that's on replay called finding diamonds, not finding diamonds in your database, 9 LinkedIn landmines. I have too many webinars. 9 LinkedIn landmines, and it's on replay. And when I get notified that somebody has registered to watch it, I will send them an email to start a conversation. And I will say, hi, whoever, noticed you registered for the webinar replay. Did it stream okay? So I'm not going to say, do you have an interest in working with me? They don't even know me. So fact, they registered, easy to answer question, did it stream okay? Will people respond? Some will, some won't, but it starts a conversation in a very comfortable way. Now, sometimes we'll combine rejection-free openings. So an example, many of us have hundreds, if not thousands of connections on LinkedIn that we either don't know well, or have lost touch with. If I could see you, I would see you nodding and saying, yep, that's the case. And we can mine our own connections to reconnect, but because of the bad behavior that's there, people pitching too soon and pitching after a connection invite and things like that, you want to make it a comfortable conversation. So you can use an opening fact question combined with open-minded. So how many of you are in the chat? Tell me, how many of you are open-minded? Are you open-minded? Say yes or no in the chat. Yes, 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 yes. Pending the topic. That's a good one. So this is based on all of it's just human nature. We all like to think we're open-minded, even when we're not, right? Yes, that is our goal. We all want to be open-minded people. So a phrase to use combining these two ideas to reconnect with somebody might be, hi, whoever, hi, Susan. We connected back at the Milestone Circles event, but we haven't had a chance to have a one-to-one. Are you open-minded to a short conversation? So that's a great combination of rejection-free openings to use to reconnect with somebody. And it makes it easier because it's not pushy, it's just very comfortable. Can anybody think of, for a conversation you want to have or someone you want to reconnect with, or can anybody think of an opening fact question statement that they might be able to use to reconnect? You don't have to put it in the chat, but think about, is there something that you might use this opening for? Now I'm going to move on to another one. I love this as a rejection-free opening. This is my favorite one. Now, I had mentioned perspective changers. So this is one of them. How important is it? And this helps regain control of a conversation if it's going a way that you don't want it to go. And it also helps manage expectations. So say like I'm having a sales conversation with somebody, and I might say, how important is it for you to do this thing this year? And it's designed to work with a sliding scale. So I might say, how important is it that you do this quarter? And the person might say, oh, very. Well, that doesn't really tell you anything. What's very mean? So I might say, on a scale of 1 to 10, where on the very scale is it? The person might say 9, and then I know, oh, okay, they're very interested in getting it done this quarter. They might say 2. If they say 2, then I'm going to ask another question. I'm going to say, why didn't you pick 1 or 0? Then what happens is, in explaining why they picked 2, that's going to give you so much more information. And either you'll understand why they picked 2 and you'll agree, or they'll convince themselves one or the other, right? By having to explain where on the scale, it just clarifies it for you. So how important is it to do this year? How important is it for you to go with the least expensive option when you're talking about how much something costs? So in the chat, Who can think of a how important is it question that you can ask in that conversation that you either put in the chat or just thought of that's coming up for you? And how important is it question that you can ask that will help clarify where somebody is? 90%. What question can you ask somebody using how important is it? How important is it to collaborate? How important is it that you fund somebody this year? I don't know. They might have a budget they have to spend. How important is it that you work with somebody who's done this before? How important is it for you to reduce, I lost it, where'd it go? Reduce your caregiving burden this year? How important is solving this problem? Yes. How important is it that you reach a new audience through social media? Yes. Yeah. How important is it to have help with this issue? It helps them come to a realization sometimes, or it just gives you the information that you need. All right, here's another one. And this is one of my favorites, I think because I'm a visual person. Just imagine. So the minute I said that, your mind went into visualization. You were ready to picture something. It's kind of like saying once upon a time, right? You feel like something's going to happen next. And it can help people visualize the future because we make our decisions twice. We first make it in our minds before we consciously, verbally make it. So some things when I've worked with people who have to pitch a new idea or pitch to investors, just imagine what you'll be able to tell your organization, the board, your team, when this project is complete. Just imagine what your boss would say if you miss this opportunity. So you'll notice those went in different directions. So you're just imagine a wonderful outcome, just imagine a not so great outcome. Because we tend to make decisions either going towards something, going away for something that's painful, or just because it makes you happy. So personally, like just imagine the smiles on your kids' faces when you tell them you're going to Disney, things like that. So just imagine can be really helpful in getting people to visualize the outcome of working with you or collaborating with you or investing with you. Can anybody think of a just imagine question that they can use, just like you came up with some really great, how important is it? A just imagine question that you can use for that conversation. And it works for networking, it works for everything because we're very visual creatures. Just imagine when we reach the right audience. Yeah, that could be it. It's also what happens after that. So sometimes if you know if it will grow their business, maybe it's just imagine when we reach the right audience and a huge percent want to work with you, right? Like so you can create that image fully. Just imagine a moss wall in your space for you and your employees breathing in nature. I would like that, Lisa. Just imagine the confidence you'll have with a solid message and strong visual identity for your company. Yeah. And sometimes I like to reverse it. It's worth experimenting. Say it that way. And then another time, say it, just imagine your company. It's a year from now, I'm making up a time span, a year from now, and your company is growing because you have a solid message and strong visual identity and people know you in the marketplace. So you can create that whole picture. Just imagine predicting behavioral crisis. Ooh, well, maybe predicting and knowing what to do about it, I would imagine. Just imagine you will fast and obtain more and wealthy. Just imagine that you'll become wealthier. Yeah, just to and you could take it even further. So why would somebody want to become wealthy? So what is their life like? Just imagine you're on your boat taking vacation because you've made all this money. Just imagine what your space will look like after organizing things and putting systems in place. And because I've had somebody come in and do that for me, it's the getting to the emotional part of it too. It's um, just imagine how it will feel, how light it will feel, how much more productive you'll be because of that. Um, just imagine your disabled loved one doing things alone, being able to do things alone, or so that can go two ways, right? Is it having to do things alone or being able to do things alone? And you can use both. Just imagine not having to worry about whatever the problem is anymore. Absolutely. The weight off your shoulders. Just imagine how the world would become a better place if you and I started taking this action. Yeah, love it. That's great. So, thank you, Paula. So before I take some questions, I have remember that basis for a script I gave you with the opening fat question for reconnecting with people. I have actually a worksheet with some other phrases that you can use for that. If that's something that would be helpful to you, you can email me at hi@bethgranger.com, or if you connected with me or followed me on LinkedIn, my messages are open there, so you can do that there. I'll put my email in the chat in case you want to do that. I think we are ready for questions, Cami.
Yes, awesome. And first of all, thank you so much, Beth. That was amazing. The
You're
one thing
welcome.
I wrote down that I loved is when you shared curiosity is fuel for a great conversation. That was my fave. Hey,
Excellent.
everyone in the chat, put your favorite line. I mean, it was such great nuggets there. So put your favorite nugget, if you will, inside of the chat too.
Yeah.
All
And I
right.
will have two other phrases to share after the question. So
Woo!
hang around.
All right, so we do have a few questions coming through. The first one is, how can we balance being empathetic while sharing personal challenges to not be sappy, but rather resilient?
So I'm a visual person. I wish I could. Can I read that?
Yeah, you
Where
see
would
it
that be?
at the very bottom, the Q&A at the bottom. I'll try to put it in the chat as
Oh,
well.
I found it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. How can we balance being empathetic while sharing personal challenges? So I love this question because we are all very resilient, more than we know. And that's a whole other talk that I may give sometime. But um, especially when it comes to, I mean, there are different kinds of conversations. So I don't know what kind of conversation you're thinking about here. But for instance, in a sales conversation, it's not about us, it's about the other person. So their needs and wanting to be empathetic. When it's a more personal conversation, yes, I do believe it's much harder because there's the emotional part that's involved. And to me, I just like to say what is. So sometimes I can say, this is an uncomfortable conversation. I'm so glad we're having it.
It's good.
Thank you.
There's one more. Do you see the next one? Oh,
Yes. Yes. When will this replay be available? So I don't have the answer to that question,
yes,
but you
it
would.
will be available within a week. I do have a few other questions too. I will we can send it to you as well, Beth. But the one of these says, I need to learn communication strategies to attract high-end sponsors. Well, basically it's like any thoughts in regards to like home health care, anything to think about in that type of industry, a service-based industry, home care, healthcare. And I guess it's kind of back to the question earlier, you're kind of in a conversation or inside of an industry rather, where it's very sensitive. It's sensitive of who you're working with. So anything specific for those particular founders?
Sure. Well, and some of it depends on who the conversation is with. So
Yeah.
you're having conversations with the people that you've hired to do this work potentially, if that's what your business is. You're having conversations with the actual person who needs the help, and then you're having the conversations with the family member of the person, and then of course you might have investors depending on how your business is structured. So really just using these foundational ideas, right? Using that trust triangle and asking questions and being curious and showing that you really care about the result. And remembering that those questions lead to the relationships, and the strength of that relationship and the trust that's built is what will lead to the outcomes.
Awesome. Awesome. There's one more sent over to you. And if you all have any other questions, please put it in the Q&A at the very bottom of your screen. We have a couple of more minutes for our live Q&A.
And I see you put one, or you asked, what's one thing people should do before a high stakes conversation that makes the biggest difference? Yes, that would be plan ahead. Think about the conversation. Think about what your desired outcome is. Think about what that person's space might be. What questions could plan ahead? What questions could you ask them to understand where they are coming from and their needs, to determine together whether taking those next steps makes sense. Here's one in the chat. I lost out on some potential partnerships because I didn't respond in time. Do I have any advice for rehashing conversations and projects? So I love that one because it's probably happened to all of us. You know, there are only 24 hours in the day. And I have a very wise friend who once said to me, Beth, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So in thinking about the conversations that you have coming up, you could also think about, where were there conversations that you could reconnect on and start the conversation up again? So for instance, is there still a possibility of a partnership with that person or organization? So the reconnecting thing, you could use that opening fat question and say, you know, I realized, and you can be very honest about it. I realized I may have missed out on that partnership because I didn't get back to you quickly enough. But I think what you're doing is such a great job, and I would love to be able to discuss the possibility of partnering again in the future. And what perspective changer would you use to invite them to see your credibility without being too salesy, especially if you're working across disciplines and so leading work that is more novel? Well, to me, that's where third-party stories come in. If it's truly like you've never done it before and you just want to try something, that's a different conversation. But if it is something that you've done before, even with not a lot of people, you can tell that third-party story. So it's not saying, hey, I'm great. It's, well, when I did this with X, Y, and Z, these were the questions they had. These were the results. Because especially now, people want to buy, but they don't want to be sold to, right? So people don't want to be salesy, don't want to deal with people who are salesy. At least I don't. I have some friends who their role is 100% sales, and they actually like getting cold calls because they like to kind of spar back and forth. But for most of us who have businesses of any kind, that's not our most comfortable place, is that conversation.
There's one for us for you in the Q&A.
All right, let's see what we have there. What is the most important if people are not happy and might not be listening to you? Yeah. So that's a challenge. So an example might be something happened in the relationship, or you sold them a product and it was broken. Let's just do an example we could all have every day, right? You got something from Amazon and it was broken. So there might be somebody who's unhappy. The key thing is showing them that you truly want to understand why they're not happy, and just being honest about that and asking them enough questions. The answer might not change. You still, depending on the situation, might not be able to resolve it or do something differently, but showing that you let them speak and that you are truly listening, and asking follow-up questions and clarity questions can absolutely help. And second part of that was, what do you think the skills we need to have to become good at conversation? Truly, it is asking good questions, coming up with those really good questions, because that just makes the conversation continue. So if a conversation seems like it's dying out, if you ask another question, what's the person going to do? They're probably going to respond.
Yeah. Here, I have one for you, Beth. Since you are a
Yeah.
Milestone Circles graduate, and I am sure there are Milestone Circles participants sitting here, and they are feverishly working on their milestone. And if
Yeah.
you're not a graduate or participant of the Milestone Circles program, we'll put the link in the chat so if you want for you to apply. But they have 12 weeks to finish this milestone. There are conversations that they need to have, and want to make sure that they are able to hit this milestone in 12 weeks. So basically making progress forward with their business. So what advice would you give founders who are on using strategic conversations to just not be focused on perfection or over preparation, but what are like a couple of key things that they should do to just get started in the conversation to be able to move forward?
Yeah. I love that, because nothing's ever going to be perfect, but moving forward is super important. That's in fact why I did the Milestones project, because there was a project I kept putting off and it forced me to make the time for it. So I would say just thinking about the conversations that will help you. In other words, who do you need to speak to either to learn something or to make something happen? So thinking about which conversations can help you move forward. So shall we take one more question, then I can move on to those additional phrases? If there is one more
Okay.
question,
Yeah,
let's
just one
see.
more. Yeah.
Um, okay, so this is less of a question and more of a statement. Somebody said that um, somebody worked on a conversation using ChatGPT. So I find ChatGPT to be a great sort of sparring partner, if you will. So you can actually practice conversations with it. So you can say, pretend you're a whatever, let's have a conversation. So I don't know, certainly a conversation with a human is going to be way better, because ChatGPT can only pull from conversations it finds, things it finds out there in the public space to build from and use the next likely word. But I think as a sort of sparring partner and practice partner, you could also find a networking friend, buddy, someone in your organization or that also has their own business. And you can say, hey, I have these important conversations coming up. Can we role play the conversation? So the more you do it, the more comfortable that you will be. So I'm going to move on to the additional phrases I wanted to share with you. Help me understand. So help me understand is if you're sort of losing control of the conversation, or sometimes somebody will seem combative right off at the start and you don't know why. So you don't know the backstory. Maybe they've worked with somebody that does what you do and they've been burned in the past. So um, it's also helpful for getting data that you don't have. So an example for me, something I might ask on a sales conversation is, help me understand the decision-making process at your company. So when I worked in corporate, I was looking for a new um, tool to publish to the company's website. And it was down to 3 vendors. And it was December, like it is now. And one of the people called me and said, he was saying something about when was I going to decide, because he had a boat payment to make. So first of all, he had not worked on that trust triangle, because do I care that people make decisions for their own reasons? I don't care that he has a boat payment to make. I don't have a boat. If he had asked earlier on, help me understand what the decision-making process is, what's the process you go through here? What are the other people that have to be involved? That would have gone much better. And then another one from a category called labeling is what happens next. So if I'm in a conversation with somebody and they say, yeah, I'd like to work with you. And I say, what happens next is, and I share the next steps. That gives a person confidence because it shows that I have done this before and I know the next steps. And I'm taking their hand essentially and leading them to what's going to happen in the future. So it really provides confidence. And rather than saying, when you say yes, for instance, you could say, not if you say yes, if you say something like, when you say yes, the next steps, what happens next are that I send you this, you do that. It's just, it provides that confidence. So those are two extra phrases. And I know I went through a lot of things pretty quickly, but think about that trust triangle. So the asking the questions that leads to the empathy that then gives you a little bit of courage to make that ask and not going too quickly. The slowing down to speed up is a saying that a lot of people say. Remember that curiosity is a fuel for great conversations and people do things for their own reasons. And that the person asking the questions controls the conversation. So in the chat, one last chat item for you is what one action will you take, or have you maybe already taken during this session? What one action will you take based on this conversation today? Thank you, everybody. Very, very kind. So what are you going to do? Latoya is going to use back questions for follow-ups. Start saying what happens next. Thinking about conversations beforehand. It's not my book, by the way. It's written by a guy named Phil M. Jones, and we're up to, I think, 52 certified guides. I've been trained in the work and can use this work any way I want and combine it with the other work that I do. But it is called Exactly What to Say. Plan before meetings. Love that. Ask open-ended questions. Yes. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Excellent. Reconnect with some individuals. Yes. Contact people I may not have been comfortable reintroducing myself to. I love it. That's great. And by the way, I never told you the end of that story of when I was trying to get the new computers and the CFO wanted the drives taken out. I went back and found out that would actually cost more to have the drives taken out and that our software came on the CDs at the time. So I did get those computers. So, and when it comes to networking conversations, networking is now a huge part of how I have grown my business. So having those conversations, even when you're uncomfortable, just practice and keep going. So what happens next for you is that you start using these concepts. So I'll pass it back to Cami.
Awesome. Wonderful session. Thank you so much, Beth, for taking the time to speak with our community, sharing your insights, and setting such a great overview. And on behalf of the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center and everyone in attendance, we sincerely thank you for joining us. We would also love for you to join us in our upcoming webinars. You can view the upcoming events by using the link in the chat. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to welcoming you back online with us very soon.